Okay, Sen, just double checking you can hear me okay? All right, great. I'm standing by. Good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome to the Africam show. My name's Ben Coley, and I'll be with you for the next 45 minutes as we enjoy some of the fabulous sights from our huge plethora of cameras dotted around the African continent. And we've started off in Safari Hook in Namibia, with some zebras having a little bit of a jostle, it seems, which is not unexpected with zebras. They are a little cantankerous and they do have a little bit of a scrap from time to time, but always nice to see some zebbies to start the afternoon. Don't forget it's live and interactive. Love to hear from you. Love for you to send in your questions and comments. We'll try and read out as many as we can or I can. And we would very much love to hear from each and every one of you. Want to know what you're up to, what you'd like to see, anything interesting that you have seen over the last 24 hours or the last week. And I thought we'll have some good discussions over the next 45 minutes or so. It's still looking rather dry and dusty in Namibia, which is unsurprising, of course. Much further west, much more arid. Over where I'm based in the Lowveld, it is a lot greener, a lot more humid, still very, very warm. But say, to be expected this time of year, the height of summer, of course, in early February. Very, very humid. But nice to see some mountain zebras as opposed to the typical plain zebras that we can see. You can see there's very obvious sort of gridiron sort of stripes on their flanks or on their rumps. And no sign of any shadow stripes in where you'd normally expect to see on a plains zebra. Bowl of kittens. Glad you could join us. A very good afternoon or morning to you, depending, of course, on where you are joining us from. It's always nice to know where people are and that we are broadcasting to so many different corners of the globe. Always a very special feeling to know that we are able to bring you your very own little treat and taste of Africa. VNC, you're in a snowy Seattle. Snow, not something I've seen for a while and not something we get a lot of in this area. Glad to hear you're looking forward to the show and you have a hot cup of coffee. Always a good way. I'm assuming in Seattle it is still relatively early for you, so enjoy that cup of coffee. And I motivate that you have multiple cups and ensure that you have a very energetic day. April Hour, you're in a sunny Connecticut, contrasting to a snowy Seattle. You have a warm berry muffin. Well, that sounds actually really rather tasty. I do not have a warm berry muffin, but I may see if I can procure myself something similar. That sounds like a nice afternoon snack for me. Jan Powers, greeting everybody as well. I'm glad you could join us. Bob from Kalamazoo in a cold Michigan. And wow, I'm going to have to try and I have to read this name to make sure I say it correctly. Bleski's for Chunk for Prince. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Been a while since you've been able to catch the show. I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad you've been able to join us today. You've got up early and you have got your coffee. Excellent stuff. I've been so busy reading all these wonderful comments coming through, I've neglected the zebras somewhat. Looks like we've got a youngster here, a little bit skinny legs. How these things survive in the arid environment in and around the Tosha National Park, which is where the Safari Hook waterhole is a bit of a mystery to me. In these, particularly in the drier winter months. But you can see some of the adaptations that these zebras have to enable them to survive in these hot temperatures. You may have noticed the one that walked past, very, very white bellies. It's one of, here comes another one. Just see how the stripes stop almost as if they were ribs. And you can see the pure white bellies, which I believe is an adaptation for being in very dry areas. Bearing in mind, a lot of the heat from the sun is absorbed by the ground and then radiated back out, creating thermals. That's what the vultures and other birds of prey use to gain height and save energy. But you've got a lot of heat radiating off that surface. So having a nice plain white belly like that is an excellent way to try and reflect the heat and regulate your body temperature. You find that with a lot of arid specialists. Carol, you have a glass of milk and a spoon of peanut butter. Are you mixing this with your milk, or are you literally just eating peanut butter off the spoon? Either way, I think is absolutely acceptable. Nothing wrong with a milkshake with some peanut butter in it, that's for sure. I actually got some peanut butter ice cream the other day, which I'm still not convinced about, but it does work well with a hot brownie, I discovered. These two having a proper tangle. I assume mother and didn't see if it was son or daughter, but I think there's definitely a relation there. Always lovely to see family members interacting. Sometimes it does look a little bit aggressive, and as they get a little bit older, they do need to be disciplined from time to time. Okay, that was a lovely way to start the show there at Safari Hook. Let's head down to Tembe in the Eastern Cape, well, to the Maputo land, rather. Slightly more north of the Eastern Cape, apologies, up into the northern KwaZulu-Natal. And we have a lone elephant having a little bit of a dust bath under the careful watch of a few impalas. And of course, if you've been watching the cameras recently, you might know that there's been big news at Tembe with the python a couple of days ago, which took out this young impala but was unable to swallow it. And the impala was lying in view. I'm not sure what happened today, if there were any updates. But pretty amazing thing to see a python as large as that, 3 or 4 meters, I believe. Jean Gale, you're saying it's below freezing and you've got a little bit of snow in the north of Seattle. Wow. We do not have any of that. It's been a balmy 36 or 37 degrees where I am in Hoedspruit, in the Lowveld, the eastern side of South Africa, close to Kruger National Park. This time of year, very, very hot and very, very humid and sticky. Really rather unpleasant, if I'm honest. Diane H., you said you witnessed the python and the impala incident. And you're saying, yes, it's sometimes hard to watch, but nature is exactly as you said, hard to watch. But say it is the way of the world, unfortunately. We tend to anthropomorphize and project emotions onto it. And yes, it's a terrible shame for the little impala, but the snake also didn't get its meal. So it's sort of six of one and half a dozen of the other. It's very difficult to disassociate ourselves sometimes, but we see it all the time when predators take out prey and you see them eating and feeding and choking them out or ripping them to shreds, to be a little bit more graphic about it. But it has to happen. And if the predators don't eat, they themselves will struggle. There is the Impala. I'm amazed to see that nothing has still eaten it. That's very, very strange. You'd have thought a scavenger uh, would have would have sort of helped themselves, especially last night. Diane you're asking, would the meat be bad to eat after 24 hours in African heat? And would a predator that does eat it eventually be sick? Certain things would turn their nose up at it. A cheetah, for example, does not like to eat meat that has been festering in the sun, but things like lions and hyenas will have absolutely no problem digesting some rotting flesh. They've got incredibly virulent stomach acids, very, very low pH numbers. Vultures as well. You're sort of talking pHs between 1 and 2, same with a crocodile. And they have a huge amount of specialized bacteria and enzymes in their stomach that can deal with the pathogens that build up in meat that is sitting in African sunlight. Certain things may turn their nose up at it if it's been there for too long, but I'm very surprised that nothing did find it last night. I think probably what has played a role in that it wasn't opened up. If a predator had attacked it and it was bleeding and then left it and it had died, that would have allowed that smell of flesh out into the air and possibly attracted some sort of scavenging animal. But the fact that the snake constricted it, there's no obvious open wound which has released that scent out into the air. So as it does decompose in the heat, I'm sure something is going to find it. I see I've been sent through a bit of a report on what happened. So if I go quiet for a second, I just want to quickly read it and I'll give you the highlights. Bear with me. Well, I've just seen that apparently there was a battalier picking at it this morning. Battaliers and tawny eagles, often the first things to show up at a dead animal and followed swiftly by vultures and other scavengers. But it seems, and I was not aware of this, it seems that the snake itself had an injury which might have had something to do with the fact that why it wasn't able to swallow the prey. Although it sounds like the injury was quite a severe one close to the cloaca, which is the part of the snake that it lays its eggs through, that it defecates through, same as a bird. And it seems that there is a potential for its recovery, but it is going to require a little bit of rehabilitation, but hopefully that snake will be able to be returned to its natural habitat. So I assume, therefore, somebody went out, found the snake, discovered that it was quite badly injured. The relevant veterinary services were called, and they're going to try and rehab it and release it back into the wild. David, I did wonder about that, whether the odor of a snake would put other creatures off, but no, I don't think so. There probably would be some residual scent of the snake, but it doesn't normally stop other scavengers. A jackal doesn't mind if there's the scent of a lion, which is equally as dangerous as a python to the jackal. So I don't think that would be the problem. I think the issue is there just isn't enough of a scent in the air yet. And for whatever reason, it seems that no potential marauding scavengers happened to come past here last night. I can't believe it'll be around for much longer, though. But obviously, we'll keep you informed if there is any news. Okay, but it sounds like we've got some elephants up at Alono in Kenya. So let's go and check in with some ellies. Two beautiful big bulls. One with its trunk firmly clamped on the inflow pipe, making use of that fresh water. You can see the trunk sort of flexing as it dilates its nostrils, sucking the water up into the trunk, holding maybe 7, 8, 9 liters of water at a time. We'll assume that the one on the right as we're looking is the more dominant, as he's got the prime position by the pipe. Also does seem to be in a bit of must as well. I actually saw this guy the other day on this camera who also had the same position and did chase off another elephant. I recognize the fact that he's only got the one tusk. And despite the fact that the other one has longer tusks, it does look as if the one on the right is a little bit older. And the fact that he might be in some must as well possibly does give him the psychological upper hand. Marcus has just sent me through a picture of the snake trying to swallow that impala where the horns perforated through the skin. Sure. Whether that is the injury they were talking about, you can see the size. I can see the size of that snake's mouth. And they have an amazing jaw structure, the snakes, of course. They can't unhinge their jaws, but the quadrate bones, which are the jaw bones right at the back, placed very far back. The two lower jaw bones are not fused together by the chin. They can separate, they can flex, and that top jaw can also sort of move backwards and forwards, so it can sort of walk the prey into its mouth. But it must have how it managed to regurgitate with those horns there. I'm not sure. That must have also done some damage. But sounds like the injury was closer to the cloaca. I'd have to see some more photos. Sorry, we've gone back to talking about the snake and ignoring the elephants, but amazing to see those pictures coming through. Lila May 6 from Ohio. You love, love, love elephants. Well, Alono is the place to be. Constant stream at the moment of big bull elephants coming down to quench their thirst, but very rare, rather like Tembe, that we see any breeding herds. I've never seen a breeding herd of elephants at Alono, and I think my reasoning for that, not that I visited the area, but I've obviously had a look. The area where this reserve is located, there are no perennial rivers, and there are no big lakes or anything. So sure, look at those muscles contracting, sucking the water up. That's very cool. But sorry, excuse me, I just swallowed a little fly. It was flying in front of my face. Sorry, everybody. Um, I too need a drink of water. Right, where was I? Yes, so there's not much perennial water. So breeding herds have got little ones, do not want to have to travel too far and put too much stress on those youngsters. So I think they will stay in the neighboring reserves where there is a lot more access to water. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a drink to wash down my fly afternoon tea. Mindy Tillabarius' left ear is rather tatty, a good sign of age, lots of injuries walking through vegetation, lots of thorns, lots of spines on the vegetation in Africa. The trees have a right to defend themselves just as much as anything else. And that skin is very, very thin and does lead to some injuries, which get worse over time. And there's certain types of bacteria that can also start eating away at that flesh if there is a visible injury. A little bit of light must, but that's very, very cool to see the contractions, the muscular contractions at the top of the trunk. And you see, sometimes elephants can be quite messy drinkers. They'll drop water everywhere if there's plenty of water around. They're not too bothered by it. But this one is taking extra special care and caution to get that fresh water coming in. And you see it's not really dropping a drop, not wasting any of it. You can see how much more sunken the temples are on the one on the right, the one closer to us on the left. Good sign of age, and again, social status, hierarchy within these bachelor groups of males. Again, testament to his position at the pipe. See, again, not dropping a single drip by the look of it. Got that trunk well and truly wedged down the throat. interesting little mark on this one's ear as well. Whether that's a bit of scar tissue or just a trick of the light, I'm not too sure. Doesn't look to be a hole through the ear, maybe just a sort of a nasty scratch that he got there, and it's just a little bit of sort of crusty scab material. If he did break that trunk, sorry, that tusk, the tusk is broken off above the, I suppose you'd call it the gum line of the modified incisor that is his tusk. Possible that he didn't have a tusk at all. JJ, good question. Do elephants' ears bleed when they rip them? I would, if they were to perforate one of the veins, you can see the veins even through the front of the ears, but particularly on the back of the ears, then they would bleed, yes, but I don't think they would bleed for very long. I've never personally seen one bleeding, but I have no doubt that it would bleed a little bit. Thankfully, there's no major arteries, but those veins are um, pretty substantial if one was to go through one of those veins. So I would think so, but it'll coagulate pretty quickly, I would think, in the heat. I really see that temporal gland nicely behind this elephant's eye as well. Look at them. I've never noticed that before, the way that they're really working hard to suck the water out of that pipe. I think there's other ones patiently waiting his turn. You can see he's just sort of loitering with a little bit of intent, fiddling around, resting his trunk. He's not drinking, his legs crossed. I think he's just hoping for his turn. See the way that trunk is just fiddling around. Very common sort of behavior to look at for an elephant that's, I wouldn't say necessarily being submissive, but he's thinking. He's just biding a little bit of time. Lovely symmetrical tusks, this one on the right there. Well, we'll hope the one on the right does get an opportunity to have a drink. I'm sure that's what he's waiting for. But I think let's head down to the northwest of South Africa now, to Madikwe and Tower Lodge. Sounds like we've got a crop. I assume that there's a crocodile lying on the bank. Quite hard to make out at the moment, but there was an interesting interaction with four crocodiles here the other day, all fighting over what I believe was a young wildebeest. Yeah, sort of hiding behind that vegetation, doing what crocodiles do, lie perfectly still and ambush predators, of course, but here just warming up a little bit in the sun, I have no doubt. You can see those ridges on the back of the crocodile, what they call osteoderms, which are designed to help it absorb heat. There are networks of blood vessels, rather similar to the elephant's ears, running through those raised, sort of protruding bits of bone. Just brings them closer to the surface of that leathery skin and allows that blood to be heated up and then passed back around the rest of the body, trying to get them up to optimum temperature. taking some late afternoon sun, so he can remain active during the evening. Not that the temperature really drops here, I have to say. Last night at about 10, 11 o'clock, it was still in the high 20s or mid 20s at least. Tim, how good's a crocodile's hearing? Honestly, Tim, I don't know. That's something I would have to research and double check for you. I would think gut reaction is not particularly acute. I'm sure it can pick up some sound, but is by no means their primary sense. They do have very good eyesight. Um, yeah, I'll have to have a look. Let me see what I can find out for you, Tim. Bowl of kittens, you're asking if elephant ears are cartilage like ours. I don't think so. There's not much cartilage in there. It's mostly skin, muscle, and tissue. So I often refer, when we have those elephants with floppy ears, you normally say the cartilage, there's a problem with the cartilage. But having looked into that recently, it seems that there isn't much cartilage in there. I sort of made that same assumption that they were the same as ours. So what it is that has damaged those ears to make some ears floppy, I'm still trying to work out whether or not it is a genetic problem or if it's as a result of an injury. I'm not 100% sure, but generally speaking, there's not really any cartilage like ours, which is a lot softer and more malleable. Basically, it's just skin and muscle and tissue fibers. Jack de Boer, you were saying what a cool crocodile. Indeed, all crocodiles are very cool customers. Quite a few Egyptian geese gathered in the distance there, but it sounds like we have a giraffe that might be coming for a drink back over at Safari Hook in Namibia. Let's head over there. Hello, Mr. Giraffe. Definitely a boy. Looking at his ossicones, quite thick, well developed, no tufty hairs on the top, but looks like a youngster. Just doesn't look quite as big as other giraffe I've seen, although it's quite a pronounced bump on the forehead, which is often a sign of a little bit of age. But again, genetics, you get larger giraffe and smaller giraffe. Just to go back to a question from Tim about the crocodile's hearing, I have had a quick look online, so don't shoot the messenger. Obviously, I'm just sort of trying to pass on what I'm finding, but it sounds like they do have a good sense of hearing, similar range of hearing to us as humans. Can also pick up low frequency sounds, which would make sense if they're hearing under the water. They can pick up vibrations, but they'll also hear out of the sound, out of the water as well. So better than I thought. I've never really considered a crocodile's hearing, but it would make sense that they would pick up vibrations under the water, certainly to hone in on prey. Things splashing takes me back to watching Jaws and things. Lima May 6 in Ohio. Do elephants have peripheral eyesight? If you're referring to how sort of all-encompassing their vision is. They can see quite far around their heads. If you think about where their eyes are positioned, like all non-predatory animals, their eyes are on the sides of their heads, so they don't have binocular vision. But they can't see right behind them because they've got a massive set of ears in a way and a rather bulky body as well. So you always have to be careful approaching an elephant from behind or even passing behind an elephant because they do get a little bit uncomfortable because they can't see you. And they're a little bit more jumpy than you might sometimes think, elephants. They'll often watch you out of the corner of their eye, sort of cock their heads slightly to keep an eye on you. And they don't like it if you go completely behind, sort of into that blind spot. Come on, Mr. Giraffe, are you going to have a drink or not? A typically tentative giraffe. You can see those characteristic bald spots on the top of the ossicones. Oh, no, mock charge. But I think in very good condition. I think this giraffe is a little bit older than his skin condition might suggest. Looks in excellent condition if I look at the skin. There's no obvious wear and tear there, but looking at those calcium deposits on the forehead, the bumps behind the ears, above the eyes, that suggests a giraffe of a decent age. Hello, Amber. I'm glad you could join us, even if you are a few minutes late. You are forgiven. And I'm glad you had a chance to hear about the update of the python sighting down in Tembe. Not something you see every day, that's for sure. And I'm glad to hear you have your coffee. And that you love the shows. Thank you. Oh, something distracting. He's still ruminating, so he needs to swallow if he's going to go and have a drink. Oh, no. This is the frustration of every wildlife photographer. Is the giraffe going to drink or is it not? It normally gives quite a few mock charges. And then rather annoyingly, they'll often just change their mind completely, turn around and walk away after you've waited half an hour diligently, patiently, hoping for that lovely photographic opportunity. Classic image of a spread-legged giraffe, head down. No. You tease, Mr. Giraffe. You tease us all. Nice to see some plain zebras in the background as well. The Cape zebra or the mounted zebra have obviously moved off. But we can understand the reticence of this giraffe in going down to drink. It's such a vulnerable and uncomfortable position. Oh, thinking about it. So it has to be absolutely sure that there is no impending danger because it's not going to be easy to react to it once adopting this really rather uncomfortable looking position. Always say it, but the stresses that must be on the joints of this animal are immense. Bad enough just having those long spindly legs and a body that weighs in excess of a ton, but to then put all that weight forward. Oh, there we go. Worth waiting for. Always nice to see that quick rising of the head as well. that beautiful S of water. Corey, you were saying that you watched Eco Training's live bushwalk on Friday, found some dove and starling tracks, but they didn't give specific species. So you're asking whether they all have the same tracks. Some do, some don't. It's quite hard to tell the difference. I mean, a red-eyed dove will have a bigger track than, say, an emerald-spotted wood dove. But a Cape turtle dove and a laughing dove, um, they're going to be almost identical. The stride pattern, they have those little steps, so it's normally almost a continuous trail of feet. They don't really have much of a stride pattern. You can certainly identify a dove track, but and a starling track certainly. But to go individual species, very, very difficult. Again, greater blue-eared starlings, Birchall's starlings, plum-coloured starlings, they're all around about the same size. I'd say, sorry, greater blue-eared and glossy. Sorry, Birchall's you could probably estimate because it's a slightly bigger bird. Same with the Meave starling up in the north end of Kruger, which is a slightly bigger bird. But you're going to be arguing over, 3 or 4 millimeter difference. So it's safe just to say dove or starling. When it comes to any sort of tracking assessment, nobody would expect you to be species specific. There are certain species that we can be specific on that have unique things that you can see in the track, like the mongoose species. We can differentiate between slender and dwarf and banded and white-tailed, but individual dove species and starling species, very, very little difference. Nalinator from Germany. I'm sorry, it's very cold there. You're asking about male giraffes? Are they solitary or in bachelor groups? The answer is yes to both. Um, they're often seen on their own, but it's not uncommon to see them hanging out with a few other males. It's equally not uncommon to see a male hanging out with some females either. There is no rigid structure. They tend to sort of roam around on their own. That being said, in an area particularly like this, remember they can see for huge distances. They tower over most of the vegetation and they can see each other from afar. So I personally am of the opinion that there's probably more of a social structure than perhaps we give giraffe credit for. We generally just lump them as having temporary associations. They sort of come and go, and those sort of groupings often change. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit more to it that we're aware of, because they can communicate visually. The whites on the back of their ears, that's follow me sign that we often talk about, very, very visible to a giraffe over long distances due to their greater height. And Lena May, I'm glad you're enjoying our picturesque giraffe. Amber, you had no idea how much a giraffe weighed. Yeah, more than you think. So well over a ton, 1.5 tons maybe for a big male. It's an enormous animal. If you ever stood next to one, you don't really appreciate it. I live in a wildlife reserve, and I went for a jog the other day, which I'm very proud to say. I managed to motivate myself to do it. And I was jogging down the road, and there was a giraffe feeding on a tree next to the road. And I got to about 20 meters from it, and it just kind of stared at me. And I didn't want to disturb it. But when you're standing that close to a giraffe, you have to remember it's a wild animal. If you think a horse can kick hard, imagine a giraffe kick. Can say kill a lion. They can kill other giraffe. People have been killed and seriously injured by giraffe kicks. So it's not an animal that you want to mess with. It's bigger than you think, and it's still a wild animal, even if it is used to people. Stone magic. Are giraffes good swimmers? I've never seen a giraffe swim. You can see how tentative they are just to have a drink. So I think it's highly unlikely. But could they swim? I would think they probably could. Animals are generally buoyant. They will have very heavy legs, very, very strong calciferous bones, not so much bone marrow. They have to be strong, those spindly little legs to carry that great weight. Um, but yeah, I've never seen it. I've never heard of it. I would think they would wade across water if they had to. They have the advantage of having a giant snorkel, I suppose. But could they swim? Probably. Would they want to swim? I think absolutely not. I somehow feel they might topple over a little bit as well. Sorry, you're welcome for the answer to your track question. But yeah, just for future reference, yeah, the doves have a very specific sort of three toes forward, one toes back, as the starlings, but the starlings have a much longer stride length, and they also have a very long back toe in comparison to the front ones. Minnie Tilpa, are you saying you stood next to a giraffe in a zoo and its legs were as tall as you? Um, yeah, and you're 5'3", so there you go. I mean, you could probably walk underneath that giraffe and barely touch its belly. It's like anything else. When you're driving around in a vehicle, you don't often get an appreciation of just how big these animals are. Remember especially if you're on the back row of a safari vehicle, your head is 2.5 meters at least above the ground, and you kind of lose a bit of perspective. That's why a walk is such an incredible experience to go on out in the African bush, even if there aren't big five animals out there, just to get a true appreciation of the size and scale of a lot of the animals out there. Zygote, you're saying that yes, giraffe walk across the Mara River. And so they've got those heavy bones, a bit like a hippo, in their legs. So I would think they act a little bit like a diver's belt and probably would anchor their legs to the ground pretty easily. But I'm sure they do it only under protest. Speaking of wobbly, spindly little legs, the characteristically long legs of a baby zebra. Look at the belly height, almost the same as mum. Doesn't stand out to a predator. Having a sneaky look through the grass. This makes it harder for them to isolate the young. Okay, that was a nice little trip to Safari Hook. Let's head over to Roy's Dam at Sylvan Safaris for some kudu. Oh, one of my favourite antelopes. Such a majestic king, the kudu. Particularly the males. Everybody loves the kudu male. But the female's always very beautiful. I always think of their little cappuccino moustache whenever I see kudus. And of course, let's be frank about it, ridiculous ears. Oh, there is a male. Look at that. Beautiful. The kudu cop, emblem of the Kruger National Park. Spectacular arrangement of horns. If you want to see the really nice widespread ones, you'll find them more in the western side of the country, just regional variations. In the Kruger area, they're normally a little bit narrower, just an adaptation because they have a lot more vegetation to deal with. So it's just easier for them to maneuver through this thicker vegetation if you've got slightly narrower horns, but they still have to put their chins up if they're going to flee through the bushes, otherwise they'd get caught on everything. magnificent animal. See a nice size comparison against the Impala ram there with the Kudu cows. Nice to see kudus out in the open. They do normally prefer the thicker vegetation. Yeah, that one relieving herself, and you can see that lovely white sash on the underside of the tail. The kudu's follow me sign, just like the white on the back of the giraffe's ears or the tail of a warthog sticking up. Right, unfortunately, that's pretty much all we've got time for. That 45 minutes has absolutely flown by. Thank you so much for joining me and for all of your questions and comments. And I think I will see you again on Thursday for our Wild Moments show. But have a lovely day, everybody. Enjoy your coffees, and thanks very much for your participation.